If someone had asked me 10 years ago what my life would look like today, I think I would have described exactly this: a stable career, a cozy home, and a wife I adored. Back then, I had no doubt that Ashley and I were meant to be. I met Ashley at a friend's wedding, and from the moment I saw her, I was done for. She wasn't the kind of woman who just blended into the background. She had this presence, sharp, confident, a little unpredictable. She laughed easily, spoke with her hands, and had a way of making everyone around her feel like the most important person in the room. I remember standing by the bar, watching her argue with one of the groomsmen about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Her passion over something so trivial was both hilarious and weirdly charming. When I finally got the nerve to walk over and introduce myself, she turned to me with this knowing smirk and said, "Let me guess, you're going to say it's disgusting?" And just like that, we were off. We talked for hours that night, long after the music had died down and the last guest had shuffled out. By the time I walked her to her car, I knew two things for certain. One, she was the most captivating person I had ever met. And two, I had absolutely no idea how someone like her was still single. From that night on, Ashley and I were inseparable. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant she swore by, and to this day, I still think about the way she lit up when she talked about her favorite dishes. She had this habit of twirling her fork while she spoke, her eyes full of excitement, and I remember thinking I could listen to her talk forever. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. I wanted it to be perfect, so I planned everything down to the last detail: her favorite restaurant, a quiet walk along the river, and a ring I had spent weeks picking out. But when the moment came, my nerves got the best of me, and I ended up blurting it out in the middle of dessert. She laughed so hard she almost choked on her wine, and then, without missing a beat, she said yes. Our wedding was small but perfect. We rented a vineyard, invited only close friends and family, and danced under the stars. It was the kind of night you wish you could bottle up and relive over and over again. That was Ashley, effortless, full of life, and impossible not to love. The first few years of marriage were exactly what I had hoped for. We traveled when we could, spent lazy weekends binging TV shows, and built a life that felt solid. She worked in marketing, and I had a steady job in IT. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Our home, our little routines, our inside jokes that no one else would ever understand. We had dreams, 2 kids, maybe a bigger house someday, more adventures before we settled down completely. But for now, we were happy. And that was more than enough. Married life with Ashley was, for the most part, exactly what I had always wanted. We weren't perfect, nobody is, but we fit together in a way that made everything feel right. She was the one who pushed me to try new things, to break out of my routines, while I was the steady presence that kept us grounded. It worked. Our home was a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Ashley had a knack for decorating, and she made sure every room had a touch of warmth: soft blankets on the couch, candles that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, and little plants she insisted on keeping alive, even though she had a terrible track record with them. Mornings were our time together. She wasn't a morning person, not by a long shot, but she always managed to drag herself out of bed when I made coffee. She'd sit on the kitchen counter, still half asleep, while I made breakfast. I used to joke that she only married me because I could make the perfect omelet. She'd roll her eyes but never deny it. Work kept us both busy, but we always made time for each other. Friday nights were sacred, our date night, tradition that we never broke, no matter how tired we were. Sometimes it was dinner at a new restaurant, sometimes just takeout and a movie on the couch. She loved thrillers, the kind that kept you on the edge of your seat, while I preferred comedies. We compromised by watching both, but somehow we always ended up watching hers first. Sundays were lazy. Mornings at the coffee shop down the street, afternoons spent doing house projects or just lounging around. She loved flipping through home design magazines, always coming up with new ideas for the house. I'd pretend to be annoyed when she wanted to repaint a room for the 3rd time, but I secretly loved how much thought she put into making our space feel like home. We had our share of adventures, too. Ashley had a restless spirit. She always wanted to go somewhere, do something. Weekend road trips, last-minute getaways, trying new hobbies just because we could. I wasn't always as spontaneous as she was, but she had a way of convincing me. "Come on," she'd say, tugging on my arm, "let's make a memory." And we did. A lot of them. She had this way of making even the simplest moments feel special. A random Tuesday night could turn into a wine and board games evening. A trip to the grocery store could turn into an impromptu cooking competition. She made life feel full. Looking back, those were some of the best years of my life. The years where it felt like we were building something solid, something unbreakable. I never once doubted that we were in it together. At least, that's what I thought. The years passed, but if you had asked me, I would have told you that nothing had really changed between Ashley and me. We had settled into our life together in a way that felt comfortable, effortless even. Some couples grow distant over time, but I never felt that way about us. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our little world that existed just for the two of us. We weren't perfect, no couple is. Sometimes we argued over stupid things, like who forgot to take the trash out or whether we should spend a weekend at home or visit her family. But the arguments never lasted. Ashley wasn't the type to stay mad for long, and neither was I. We'd cool off, apologize, and move on like nothing had happened. That was just how we were. One of my favorite things about Ashley was the way she could light up a room. She had this effortless charm, this way of making everyone around her feel comfortable. If we went to a party, she was the one talking to strangers and making new friends while I hung back, sipping my drink and watching her in admiration. I never felt jealous or insecure about it. If anything, I loved that about her. She was magnetic. We had talked about starting a family, but we never set a timeline. Maybe next year, we'd say. Let's take one more trip first. Or, let's wait until we're really ready. We were both happy with just the two of us and our dog. Mac's kids were part of the plan, but we were in no rush. Money was never a huge problem. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Ashley had been doing well in her marketing job, and I had worked my way up in IT. We didn't have to stress about bills, and we could afford nice things when we wanted them. Sometimes she'd splurge on expensive skincare products, and I'd joke that she was single-handedly keeping the beauty industry alive. Other times, I'd come home to find a new piece of furniture in the house, something she'd just had to have. Our social life was mostly centered around our closest friends, a mix of couples and a few single friends who had been part of our lives for years. We hosted game nights, went to barbecues, celebrated birthdays together. It felt good knowing we had people we could count on, people who had seen us from the beginning and knew our story. I had no reason to think anything was wrong. Life was good, steady, predictable in all the ways that made me feel safe. If someone had asked me then, "Are you happy?" I would have answered without hesitation. Yes, absolutely. But happiness has a funny way of making you blind to the things you don't want to see. Looking back, I wonder if I should have noticed sooner. If there were little signs I ignored, things I brushed off because I trusted Ashley completely. Maybe I just didn't want to see them. It started small. Little things that didn't seem important at first. Ashley had always been busy with work, but lately, it felt like she was always working late. "Big project," she'd say, kissing me quickly before rushing out the door. Sometimes, she wouldn't get home until after I'd already eaten dinner alone. I didn't think much of it at first. I knew her job could be demanding. But then it started happening on weekends, too. "I need to run to the office for a few hours," she'd say, slipping on her coat while I sat on the couch with Max. I'd ask if she wanted me to bring her lunch, but she'd always decline. "It's just easier if I grab something while I'm out." Then there was her phone. Ashley and I had never been the kind of couple who kept secrets. If her phone buzzed while she was in the shower, I wouldn't think twice about glancing at it and telling her who it was. But lately, her phone was always face down, always on silent. If I happened to glance in her direction while she was texting, she'd tilt the screen away, almost subconsciously. One night, we were watching a movie when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression unreadable, and immediately got up. "Be right back," she said, walking to the kitchen with her phone in hand. I didn't think much of it, until she didn't come back for almost 20 minutes. I found her standing by the sink, staring at her screen, typing something before quickly locking it when she noticed me. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She nodded a little too quickly. "Yeah, just work stuff." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in my gut told me that wasn't the whole truth. Then there were the sudden changes. Ashley had always cared about her appearance, but lately, she had stepped it up. New clothes. Expensive lingerie I hadn't even seen her wear. Long workouts at the gym, even after already being exhausted from work. And the scent of her perfume stronger when she came home than when she left. For the first time in our marriage, I felt a creeping sense of unease. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, that work really was just keeping her busy. But once that seed of doubt was planted, it didn't go away. I started paying more attention. And the more I watched, the more I noticed. At first, I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was overthinking things, letting my imagination run wild. But once suspicion crept in, it became impossible to ignore. Ashley had been different lately, that much was clear. It wasn't just the late nights at work or the way she kept her phone glued to her side. It was the way she was around me. She used to be affectionate, playful, always finding small ways to touch me, whether it was a quick kiss on my cheek or resting her hand on my arm while we talked. Now, she seemed restless, distracted, almost like she didn't want to be in the same room for too long. And when we were together, it was as if she was just going through the motions. One night, while we were watching TV, I reached for her hand like I had 100 times before. She pulled away so naturally, so instinctively, that I don't even think she realized she had done it. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at the screen, my mind racing. Then there were the calls she didn't take when I was around. Ashley wasn't secretive about her phone in the past. We both had jobs that sometimes required late-night emails or random messages from coworkers, so it had never been unusual for her phone to buzz throughout the evening. But lately, if a call came in while we were together, she'd glance at the screen, hesitate, and then let it go to voicemail. "Who was that?" I asked once, keeping my tone casual. "Oh, just work," she answered quickly, shoving her phone into her pocket. A minute later, she picked it up and started texting. Maybe it really was work. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But the feeling in my gut refused to leave. Then there was the weekend trip. Ashley had always been close with her girlfriends, and every few months, they planned to get away. It was nothing new, sometimes a spa retreat, sometimes a cabin by the lake. I had never questioned it before. But this time, something felt off. She told me about it only 2 days before she was supposed to leave. "Oh, by the way, I'm going away this weekend with the girls," she said while scrolling through her phone. "Oh yeah? Where to?" "Just a cabin. Nothing crazy." Normally, Ashley would spend the whole week excitedly talking about what they had planned, showing me pictures of the place they rented, debating what outfits to pack. But this time, she barely mentioned it. And that's when I realized I hadn't heard her talk about her friends in weeks. On impulse, I asked, "So, who's all going?" She hesitated for half a second. Just half a second. The usual, Emily, Sarah, Lauren. A small, nagging voice in my head whispered, "Call her bluff." "Oh, nice. What time are you all meeting up?" "Not sure yet." She stood up, stretching. "I'll text them later." Something about the way she said it made my skin prickle. Ashley was a planner. She never went on a trip without every little detail worked out. And yet, she didn't know what time they were meeting. I wanted to ask more, to push her, but I forced myself to stay quiet. If I was wrong, I didn't want to come off as paranoid. But the doubt was already there, growing like a weed in the back of my mind. That night, as she packed her bag, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time since we got married, I wasn't sure I could trust her. And that thought alone made my stomach turn. Ashley's weekend trip came and went, and even though I tried to ignore the feeling in my gut, I couldn't shake the thought that something was wrong. When she came home Sunday evening, I watched her closely, searching for anything, a look, a change in her tone, a slip of the tongue that might confirm or disprove my suspicions. She walked through the door looking refreshed, like she had spent the weekend at a luxury spa. Her hair was neatly styled, her makeup subtle but perfect, and she had a faint glow to her skin, as if she'd spent time out in the sun. She didn't seem tired or worn out from a weekend of drinking wine with friends, which had always been the case after her past trips. Instead, she was almost too relaxed. Max ran up to greet her, his tail wagging furiously, and she laughed, scratching behind his ears. I stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching her. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone even. "How was the trip?" Ashley barely glanced at me as she set her bag down. "It was great. Just what I needed." "Yeah," I pressed. "What did you guys do?" She waved a hand dismissively as she kicked off her shoes. "Oh, the usual. Just hung out, drank wine, played some dumb card games. It was nice to catch up." It was such a vague answer, and the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she had planned it out beforehand. Normally, after these trips, she'd spend half an hour excitedly telling me about all the things they had done, who got too drunk, what funny things Sarah had said, what ridiculous spa treatments they had tried. But this time, it was like she didn't want to talk about it at all. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her answer. "Sounds nice. Did you take any pictures?" For the briefest second, there was a flicker of something in her expression. It was fast, so fast that if I hadn't been looking for it, I would have missed it. A slight hesitation, a flicker of discomfort before she quickly covered it with a smile. "Oh, I totally forgot," she said, shaking her head. "I was just so caught up in the moment, I didn't even think about it." Ashley never forgot to take pictures. Ever. I forced a small chuckle. "That's not like you." She shrugged, avoiding my gaze as she walked past me, heading toward the bedroom. "Yeah, well, I guess I just needed a break from everything. It was nice to unplug for a while." I didn't follow her. Instead, I stood in the living room, staring at the spot where she had just been. My mind was spinning, trying to process what I had just heard. None of it felt right. She had given me just enough details to make it sound believable, but not enough for me to ask follow-up questions. She had been too careful, too prepared. And that hesitation? That tiny moment where she faltered? It told me everything I needed to know. She was lying to me. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth right then and there. But I knew if I did, she'd just deny everything and turn it around on me. I could already hear her saying it. "You're being paranoid," or "Why don't you trust me?" No, I needed to be smart about this. If something was really going on, I couldn't just throw accusations around without proof. For the next few days, I paid even closer attention. I watched her movements, her expressions, the way she acted when she thought I wasn't looking. And with every passing day, my suspicions grew. She was more distant than ever. She barely touched me anymore. No quick kisses, no playful teasing, nothing. When we sat on the couch at night, there was an invisible wall between us, a space that hadn't been there before. If I tried to start a conversation, she gave me short, distracted answers, like she was somewhere else in her mind. Then there was her phone. I started noticing patterns. Every night, she'd get a text or a notification and immediately flip her phone face down. If she got up to grab something from the kitchen, she'd take it with her, even if she was only gone for a minute. And whenever she went to bed, she placed it screen side down on her nightstand, something she never used to do. I tested something one night. As she was brushing her teeth, I casually reached over and flipped her phone over just to see what would happen. The second she walked back into the bedroom, her eyes immediately darted to it. I saw the momentary tension in her shoulders before she quickly recovered, grabbing the phone and slipping it under the pillow like it was nothing. I didn't say anything, but I knew. Something was going on, and I needed to find out what. At this point, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. Ashley was hiding something from me, but she was careful, too careful. If I confronted her without proof, she'd just gaslight me, turn it around, make me look like the crazy one. I had to be smart about this. I spent a few nights thinking about my next move. I considered going through her phone, but that wouldn't work. She had changed her passcode, and even if I did manage to get in, she probably deleted anything suspicious. I thought about following her, but she barely left the house alone except for work and the gym, and I couldn't exactly tail her around town without raising suspicion. No, I needed something better. Something that would show me exactly what she was doing when I wasn't around. And that's when it hit me. The bedroom. If she was cheating, there was a good chance it was happening there. In our home. In our bed. The thought made my blood boil, but it also gave me an idea. I would install cameras. I spent the next day researching hidden security cameras. I found a few small, discreet ones that could be easily hidden, one inside a bedside lamp, another in the corner of the room, barely visible against the ceiling. They weren't cheap, but at this point, I didn't care. I needed the truth. That evening, I told Ashley I had to work late the next day. She barely reacted, just nodded, barely looking up from her phone. Perfect. The next afternoon, I left for work like usual, but instead of going to the office, I drove to an electronics store and picked up everything I needed. I had planned it all out. I'd set them up while Ashley was at the gym. She usually spent at least an hour there, sometimes longer. That would give me plenty of time. When I got home, I waited. Ashley changed into her workout clothes, grabbed her gym bag, and gave me a quick, meaningless "see you later" before heading out the door. The moment I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I got to work. I moved quickly but carefully, placing the first camera inside the lampshade on her side of the bed. The second one, I mounted in the corner of the ceiling, angled perfectly to capture the entire room. Both were connected to an app on my phone, allowing me to watch live or review recordings whenever I wanted. By the time she came home, everything was set. She had no idea. That night, I laid in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, knowing that for the first time in weeks, I was finally in control. If something was happening, I would know soon enough. And when I did, there would be no denying it. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. Part of me hoped, prayed, that I was wrong, that I'd check the cameras and see nothing out of the ordinary. That Ashley had been distant for some other reason, maybe work stress, maybe something personal she hadn't figured out how to tell me yet. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the other part of me, the part that had been screaming in the back of my mind for weeks, already knew the truth. I just needed to see it for myself. The cameras were set, the app installed on my phone. Every night before I went to bed, I checked the footage. At first, there was nothing, just Ashley getting ready for bed, scrolling through her phone, sometimes staring at the ceiling long after the lights were off. I watched her, looking for any sign of guilt, any flicker of hesitation. But she seemed normal. Then, 3 nights later, I got my answer. That evening, I had told Ashley I was going to my brother's place to help him with something. She barely looked up from her laptop when I left, just muttered a quick, "Okay, see you later." I didn't actually go to my brother's. I parked a few blocks away and sat there in my car, staring at my phone, watching the live feed. At first, it was just Ashley in the bedroom, doing her usual routine. She changed into lingerie, not the old comfortable kind she wore to bed, but the expensive, lacy set I hadn't seen in months. My stomach twisted. Then she picked up her phone, typed something, and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. Not even 5 minutes later, the front door opened. A man walked in like he had been here before. Confident. Comfortable. Like he belonged. I felt my entire body go numb as I watched them. Ashley smiled at him, the kind of smile she hadn't given me in months. She stood, walked toward him, and they kissed, not a peck, not hesitant, but deep and familiar, like they had done this 100 times before. The bastard even laughed, running his hands down her back like he owned her. Like I didn't even exist. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, my breath coming in short, furious bursts. I had imagined this moment over and over again, but seeing it with my own eyes? It felt like someone had reached inside my chest and ripped my heart out. She led him to our bed. Our bed. I wanted to throw my phone, smash it against the dashboard, make it stop, but I forced myself to watch. I needed to see everything. I needed proof. They didn't even close the curtains. I hit record on the app, saving the footage. Every second burned itself into my brain like a scar. This was it. This was the moment my marriage ended. But I wasn't going to just sit there and take it. No. I was going to make sure Ashley regretted every single choice she made. And I was going to start right now. I had never felt rage like this before. It wasn't the quick, fleeting kind of anger that passed after a few deep breaths. It was a cold, calculating fury, the kind that settled deep in my bones and refused to leave. Ashley had betrayed me, not just in some distant, emotional way, but physically, in our home, our bed. She had smiled at him, kissed him like she used to kiss me, let him touch her like I didn't even exist. And she thought she would get away with it. I wasn't going to let that happen. My heart was hammering as I threw my car into drive and sped back home. My hands were tied on the wheel, my breathing controlled. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to destroy her. By the time I reached the driveway, I had a plan. I parked, stepped out of the car, and walked up to the front door. My pulse was pounding, but my hands were steady as I unlocked it as quietly as possible. Inside, the house was dark except for the soft glow coming from under the bedroom door. I could hear them, whispering, laughing. The sound of my wife giggling with another man sent a fresh wave of fury through me, but I held it back. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera app, and hit record. Then I kicked the door open. Ashley screamed, scrambling for the sheets as if covering herself would erase what I had already seen. The man, the bastard who had touched my wife, jumped up, eyes wide, looking for an escape. But I wasn't letting either of them off easy. "Don't stop on my account," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You seem to be enjoying yourselves." Ashley was shaking, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words but couldn't find them. I can explain," she finally stammered. I laughed. A real, bitter laugh. "Oh, I bet you can. But don't bother, I've got all the explanation I need." I turned my phone screen toward her, showing her the video of them together. The color drained from her face. "You filmed us," she whispered, horrified. "Damn right I did." I turned to her lover, who was frozen in place, his pants still half down. "And you? You can get the hell out of my house before I do something we'll both regret." He hesitated. "Big mistake." I stepped forward, my fist clenching at my sides. I said, "Get out." That was all it took. He scrambled to grab his clothes and bolted past me, nearly tripping as he ran out of the room. I followed him, watching as he fumbled with the front door before vanishing into the night like the coward he was. When I turned back, Ashley was still sitting on the bed, the sheets clutched to her chest, her body trembling. I had never seen her look so small. Good. I walked past her, straight to the closet. Without a word, I started grabbing her clothes and throwing them out the bedroom window. What are you doing? She choked out. Exactly what it looks like. I didn't stop. Dresses, shoes, everything. I grabbed her makeup bag from the dresser and tossed it onto the front lawn. You don't live here anymore. She stumbled out of bed, tears spilling down her face. Please, we can talk about this. I turned on her so fast she flinched. Talk? Oh, now you want to talk? I gestured to the room, the bed she had just defiled, the mess she had made of our marriage. Was that your plan before or after you let another man screw you in my house? It was a mistake. I laughed again, shaking my head. No, Ashley. A mistake is forgetting to lock the front door. A mistake is burning dinner. I pointed at her. This was a choice. And now, you get to live with it. She was sobbing now, clutching at my arm. Please, I'll do anything. I made a stupid, horrible mistake. But I love you, and I don't want to lose you. I ripped my arm away from her grasp. You lost me the second you let him touch you. Her face crumpled, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no sadness. Just cold, absolute certainty. She had destroyed our marriage. And now, she was going to face the consequences. I pointed to the door. Get out. She shook her head. No, please. Get out. My voice roared through the room, shaking the walls. Ashley gasped, backing away like I had just struck her. I turned and walked to the closet one last time. I grabbed the suitcase from the top shelf, threw it on the bed, and started stuffing her remaining clothes into it. She didn't move, just stood there, helpless, as I packed up what was left of our life together. When I was done, I tossed the suitcase onto the front porch and held the door open. Go. Ashley hesitated, eyes searching mine, desperate for something, for mercy, for another chance. But there was nothing left to find. She stepped onto the porch, her breath shaky, her face streaked with tears. I slammed the door behind her. And just like that, she was gone. My wife. My marriage. My past. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. The silence in the house was deafening. For the first time in years, I was truly alone. No Ashley, no meaningless small talk, no forced conversations filled with half-truths. Just me, Max, curled up at my feet, and the sound of my own breathing. I stood in the doorway for a long time after she left, staring out at the darkened street where her figure had disappeared. A part of me had expected her to bang on the door, scream, beg me to let her back in. But she didn't. Maybe she knew she had already lost. Eventually, I turned back inside, stepping over the mess I had made in my rage, her shoes, her perfume bottles, the drawer I had yanked open too hard. The room smelled like her. That needed a change. I walked straight to the bedroom, yanked the sheets off the bed, and shoved them into a trash bag. The pillows, too. I didn't want to sleep on anything she had tainted. I took a deep breath, but it did nothing to ease the tightness in my chest. I should have felt relief. Victory. But all I felt was exhaustion. I poured myself a drink, not to drown my sorrows, but to take the edge off the lingering adrenaline that still coursed through me. As I sat down on the couch, my phone buzzed. I already knew who it was. Ashley. I let it ring. Then, a message popped up. Ashley, please, just talk to me. I took another sip of my drink, my hands tightening around the glass. Then another message. Ashley, I messed up. I know I did. But please don't just throw everything away like this. I scoffed out loud. Like this? As if I was the one who had burned our marriage to the ground. A third message. Ashley, I don't even know why I did it. It didn't mean anything. I love you. I slammed my glass down so hard I was surprised it didn't crack. It didn't mean anything? She had destroyed everything we built for nothing? I forced myself to breathe. I wasn't going to respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. Instead of answering, I blocked her number. That was it. No more pleading texts. No more lies. No more Ashley. It was over. For real this time. The next morning, I woke up with the same heavy feeling in my chest. I knew I had done the right thing, but that didn't make it easy. 11 years of marriage didn't just vanish overnight, no matter how much I wanted them to. But there was one more thing left to do. I grabbed my laptop and opened my email. Attached the video footage from the hidden cameras. Then, with no hesitation, I forwarded it to my lawyer. Subject line, proof of adultery, divorce proceedings. I didn't even have to think about it. Ashley was never stepping foot in this house again. I sat back, exhaling slowly as I stared at the screen. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was the start of something new. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The first few days after Ashley was gone felt surreal. I kept expecting to hear her voice from the other room, to see her hairbrush on the bathroom counter, to smell her perfume lingering in the air. But she wasn't here. She would never be here again. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I spent the next week reclaiming my space. The first thing to go was the bed. I couldn't stand the thought of sleeping where she had betrayed me. I dragged the mattress out to the curb, stripped the room of anything that reminded me of her, and ordered all new furniture. It was expensive, sure, but worth it. The house still felt empty, but at least it was mine. Ashley tried reaching out again, through mutual friends, through emails, even from a different number. I ignored her every time. There was nothing left to say. Then, one evening, my lawyer called. "I have good news," he said. "She's agreed to an uncontested divorce." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I had been preparing for a fight, for her to drag things out, try to negotiate, beg for another chance. But instead, she had given up. Maybe she realized there was no saving this. "It'll be finalized in a few months," my lawyer continued. "Given the proof you provided, she's getting nothing." I smiled at that. Nothing. She had gambled with our marriage and lost everything. By the time I hung up, the weight on my chest was lighter than it had been in weeks. This was really happening. I was free. The night the papers were signed, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I went out with friends. I had been isolating myself since everything happened, but that night, I let myself breathe. I laughed. I drank. I let go. And for the first time, I didn't think about Ashley. The next morning, I woke up and took Max for a long walk. The air felt fresher, my steps lighter. The pain was still there, buried deep inside, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. I wasn't broken. I had survived. And I was ready to start over.